what's going on between my ears. Everyone seems to be so clear, but I'm feeling foggy, I'm not feeling okay. Let's talk about it with Ronnie and Jorge. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. And this is the Judgement Seesaw.
Love that. Welcome back to the Judgment Seesaw. I'm your host, Ronnie Evans. I'm joined by an old friend in the industry and a great person, Jorge Edwards. Let me go make sure. Actually, I got so excited to talk, I didn't even have my mic on. I'm assuming you can hear me. How are you doing, Jorge? Why don't you talk while I set up my mic?
Sure, of course. Yeah. First of all, it's an honor to be here with you to talk about this very important topic. Second of all, that was the killer of all intro music tunes right there. That was so awesome. So I definitely set the stage for this show today. And like I said, I'm really excited. Mental health awareness is obviously something I find very important and find that it goes hand in hand in this fantasy football space. And so I just can't wait to get into it. And thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming on, man. You've been a big advocate for mental health for years now. You, Moose, Zach, I'm leaving out tons of other people, myself included. There's a good crew of people that really push this conversation forward and seem to do more and more every year. And I love the industry for their embracing of mental health awareness, for sure. For everyone that's watching, if this is your first time checking this out, just a quick note, the Judgment Seesaw is actually an economic concept, but it's been parlayed by the therapy industry. And it works like this. You can't judge and understand simultaneously. So the seesaw is basically a metaphor to help people gauge in the moment what side of that paradigm they're on when they're trying to listen to somebody. And it's a fun exercise. If you're like watching and you want to try it out, try to judge like me and Jorge while we're talking, or Jorge and I, and then try to understand at the same time, and you'll find it's almost impossible. So that's what the Judgment Seesaw is. It's a really good exercise just to be like better at active listening and learning and understanding and getting in touch with someone else, putting yourself in their shoes and not having negative judgmental reactions. And so that said, the point is understanding. I want to understand more about you and let the listeners and the fantasy community dive into a little like your thoughts on mental health, your story, and so forth. So before we do all of that, why don't you just plug your stuff, man? Just give it like a minute, and just Fantasy and Frames. You've got a lot of new stuff rolling out this year. Give us the rundown.
Sure. So starting at the end of July, it'll be 7 years since I started Fantasy and Frames, and we cover basically everything you could possibly think of when it comes to fantasy football, whether it's redraft, dynasty, IDP. I know you and we've talked plenty about IDP over the years. Best ball, DFS, you name it. You can find us all on the various social media channels at Fantasy and Frames, as well as all of our work and rankings at fantasyandframes.com. And we just like talking shop. And, like you mentioned, we did a mental health awareness series last year that, is still applicable year in and year out. And we found that to be a very important topic. We have for years. And so we were very honored to be able to share that with the fantasy football community or any community or any person who may need some help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So thank you for the plug, for letting us plug that there.
Yeah, well, Fantasy and Frames is at Fantasy and Frames on pretty much all the socials. That show was done by Zach Attack, FF Chalupa Batman, and his wife, and it's awesome. I've watched all the episodes. Definitely go over to their channel, subscribe, give those shows a view too. And as Jorge mentioned, like all of the fantasy content they do, there's nothing wrong with this, but like 99% of everything you guys do is like fully focused on fantasy football. And you have this gym of mental health stuff that's layered into it. And so I love what you guys do. I encourage everyone to go support you guys and check out that. Toronto Dave agrees. It was a fantastic series. So speaking of mental health, before we dive into like the full interview and just have an open discussion on it, can you give a quick 1 or 2 minute run through on like what you've experienced, what you've seen, and just kind of your story in relation to mental health?
Sure. So one of the big things about being in the fantasy space is confidence. That is a big thing when it comes to people having it or people who do not have it. And so one of the biggest things I've noticed over the years is just the concept of imposter syndrome, and that you don't feel like you're worthy enough to give this advice, that you're not smart enough, that you didn't do the research enough, that you're posing as somebody that you're not really. And that's something um, that you see all the time. And I think everybody kind of to a certain degree goes through that at a certain point. And I just want to tell the people out there, like, I respect, the fact that you are suffering through this, and I'm not here to tell you to easily just dismiss that, but know that you belong here, and that you put in the work here, and that nobody looks at you and is thinking, 9 times out of 10 we're our own worst enemy. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
so we think all the negative thoughts. We're critical of ourselves and the actual audience out there. And so be proud of what you do. Be proud of what you accomplish. And you're always going to have critics. You're always going to have naysayers. And at the same time, we always focus on those critics and naysayers, and we very seldomly start focusing on the people who actually support us and appreciate us. And so remember that it's for them. You know what I mean? It's for them. It's for yourself. And even the critics and naysayers, after a while, they'll come around too.
Yeah, they Toronto Jave just mentioned that Zach and Megan did like an entire episode on imposter
Mhm.
syndrome. This definition is not pulled from that. I went over to ChatGPT and was like, give me a short summary. The imposter syndrome is a persistent feeling of being a fraud despite evident success. People with it doubt their abilities and attributes and achievements to love, leading to anxiety and self-doubt. Yada yada, and I cut out the last part. I actually think that is not the best definition. Shame on you, ChatGPT, because it isn't always because of evident success. Like it can be in anticipation of success, but you haven't had any yet. And that is often where the imposter syndrome is like the strongest. Like, what am I about to do? Am I really good enough? Can I really go out and do this? Will people love me? Do they actually care what I'm saying? Am I smart enough? Like, I very much am in tune with imposter syndrome. I deal with it every day. And it is something that's been brought up a lot on this show. And it seems to be whether people deal with chronic mental health challenges like bipolar disorder or like chronic depression or anxiety or not, and they don't have any of those issues, it seems like imposter syndrome is kind of like agnostic with who it affects in the industry. It's pretty widespread. And so it's really important. I appreciate you bringing that up. What do you do to help alleviate that? I know you gave advice about mindset, but in terms of managing like your mental health, the online nature of our industry can be pretty toxic.
Right.
You've been very vocal over the years about being better people and like supporting each other and not going into all of this like negative drama. But how do you manage all of that? And what are your like tips and tricks to keeping a healthy and hygienic mental state?
I find that one of the most important things to do that is surround yourself by good people. You are a product of your environment. I truly believe that, and it's up to you to decide who you want to be having in your inner circle or your close group of friends. And that's one of the things, to go back to plugging fantasy and frames, is that one of the things that I make it a priority to have with everybody who comes on board is that we keep egos at the door. We're one big supportive family. We've all seen the Vin Diesel memes where he's like, I don't have friends, I have family. That's exactly how I view things. Love those movies, by the way. So
They're
I think
ridiculous.
they are, but you know what?
They're fun.
I
Yeah.
love that. But it really is about the people that you surround yourself with, that they're there to pick you up. You know what? You don't need 10 friends. You just need that one buddy that you can always call and count on, and they can count on you. And finding the mutual respect between other people goes a long way into kind of alleviating some of the concerns you might have. And never be afraid to reach out for help. That's another thing. Understand that you will never know everything. You'll never have the answers for everything, and that it is 100% okay to go and reach out and find that help that's out there and find those resources, because we only have one life. We only have one opportunity on this planet. Make the most of it. You have the right to be happy. You have the right to find happiness and find fulfillment. And don't ever think that you don't, because you do. 100% you do. And so for me, that's where, whether it's going to talk and therapy, whether it's getting the proper medication, or whether it's finding resources out there that work for me, and having the right people around me go just hand in hand with one another. And all that makes up a great support network. And once you have a great support network going on, then you find that it gets a lot more easy to cope with challenges. It's not easy. The coping with challenges is never easy, but
Sure.
it helps you find better ways to adapt to stressors in one's life.
Adapting to stressors in life in particular is really difficult for some people. I know it's hard for me. And
Sure.
you went through a pretty significant stressor last year, like right before the expo.
Yeah.
You blew your knee out. Um, how did that affect you mentally? You talked about you surround yourself with good people. Did you have like a good supporting cast, and was the fantasy industry part of the reason you were able to like persevere and not go into a full uh I would call it a depressive spell, is how I would react to that. But how did that go for you? How are you feeling about it now? And how does all this tie into like how you got through the injury?
So to be honest with you, I'm still coping with some of the fallout of what happened with that mentally. For those who are unaware, I was walking down my stairs, and I ended up tripping and falling, and I tore my quadriceps tendon, which is kind of important for like being able to straighten your leg. And
Oh, that's right. It wasn't your knee, it was your quad. Of
yeah,
course.
yeah. So straightening your leg, being able to have basic functions of your leg, kind of went out the window. And so I ended up having surgery, having that repaired. Pretty extensive surgery. I went online and I looked on YouTube of like, what exactly did they do to my knee? And once I watched the video, I'm like, oh my god,
Mm. And you're braver than me. I never do that.
yeah. So yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment. What can I say? Um, so obviously I love going to the Fantasy Football Expo. I've been to the expo every single year. I love the camaraderie. I love seeing all my friends and making new friends. And um, I do want to give a shout out to Nate Markham and his wife Carrie,
Of course.
uh,
Yeah.
because it was night one where everybody was in Centennial Park, for the intro, and then apparently it was like thunderstorming and raining, so everybody went into the one bar that was there, trying to stay warm and get out of the rain. And she took Carrie took Nate's cell phone and FaceTimed me, and basically took me all around the bar saying, "Hey, say hi to Jorge. He can't make it. Say hi, hi, hi." And it made me feel so included in an environment that I wish I was really there. So shout out to her and Nate for doing that. But to get back to the injury, once I had the surgery, I had to I had a little contraption on my leg that I had until November, December, where it basically locks your leg in a straight, locks your leg straight, and you're not allowed to like, move around too much on it or do anything. And so adapting to that, my wife and I, we live in a townhome. And so I was fortunate enough to, get the basement where there was, the little mini fridge and the TV and whatnot. And I had just started a new job too. So being able to telework there was a thing. Not to mention this, the day in and day out, stressors of having the injury and healing. And so it was really difficult because I basically spent the 4 months in a basement, uh, and most of the time my wife's at work, or I don't have a lot of people around me. Sure, I'd have some family members that would come by every once in a while, but for the most part, it was just me sitting in a basement with a couple windows, and that isolation and that boredom, and then the thoughts of like, am I ever going to be able to get back to where I was? Is this is this how my life is going to be going forward? And you deal with that for 4 or 5 months. Yeah, man, that has a long lasting impact. As you know, to go with what you were saying as far as the fantasy space. Like I said, all my friends in the fantasy space have reached out, have checked in on me, which I'll always be thankful for. The Fantasy and Frames family, always faithful for people outside the Fantasy Frames family like yourself, just super helpful. But at the end of the day, it's made me more appreciative of just the little things in life that we take for granted, and how just a little thing can either make your day, or it can be as simple as tripping, falling down the stairs. That it can wreck a lot of things. And so having that support network, again, that goes a long, long way.
Yeah.
And it goes to the things where there is a point where I didn't know how to react, how to cope with that. And to this day, it's still in the back of my mind. I've gotten a lot better. My knee is starting to heal up pretty well. I just need to get it a little bit stronger, and I'll be ready to race you in the 40-yard dash at the Expo this year. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Look, I'm not running in anything, so no way.
But it was a process to get over. But I'm working on it.
Well, I mean, it's a lot to go through, and it could be like, it's very isolating. I can't fully relate to that as an adult, but I did break my femur when I was in junior high, and remember like the 6 months of recovery from that. Sounds very similar. You're basically immobilized. You can't move your leg around. You gotta like going to the bathroom's a pain in the butt, and like everything's just hard. Yeah. But it's a long recovery. You're in like a year now of recovering almost, and I think that you're going to be back at the expo this year. Yes.
Oh, 100%. You better believe it.
Well, the beauty of it is, the silver lining is that you now have, like, everyone has an excuse, not that they already didn't, to like come up and give you a hug, but now everyone is going to be like, oh my God, it's Jorge. Like, you're going to get like 5 times the amount of hugs that you normally do, which is going to be awesome.
It's very humbling to think about that, but I just want to be around the community that, just being somebody who's been to the expo every year. Like the first time the expo ever occurred was 2019, when it was called the Midwest Fantasy Football Expo. And it was, not the largest group. I think,
Yep.
Bob Lund and I would say that, but just to see from 2021 what it grew into, and just the positivity, and it's going to be great being around everybody again.
I think we've talked, or I have talked with a handful of guests about the expo. It keeps coming up actually not a handful, pretty much everyone. And that and Scott Fishbowl, like those 2 events seem to be the cornerstones of tying the industry together and helping solidify like the social and community aspect of the fantasy industry that makes it so special. Another part of what makes this industry so special is that we have so many people that are willing to go out of their way to like tell people how to be better. And sometimes that can be really annoying, but it's always good and necessary. And I've always looked up to you, because you have never really had any problem getting out into the middle of something, whether it be on Twitter or somewhere else, and just saying, hey guys, like, this is how this should operate. This is not the way we should act, so on and so forth. This toxicity is unnecessary. Can you talk a little bit about, like, philosophically, what having a positive impact with your content and with your presence in this industry means to you?
Well, the fact that people listen, it's humbling in and of itself. I have imposter syndrome about that. It's like, who am I to give advice and to say, hey, don't do this, or do this, or here's my take on this.
Yeah.
So that is, but it's one of those things where I have been very fortunate enough to meet some really good people in this space. And whenever I see, a Twitter beef happening between friends, and you don't want to see it, right? And I don't. By what I mean by that is that you hate to see people argue over some minuscule BS, right? Um, and then you see them go down that extra road of just being super insulting. And so when I see people getting into beefs on Twitter, my first thought is like, oh my god, you idiot, why are you embarrassing yourself? My first immediate thought is like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Because you don't get into these arguments unless something has triggered you and has made you feel pretty bad about yourself, to the point where you feel you have to be defensive and start taking it out on somebody else. And so I'll DM somebody when I see this going on, or I'll message somebody and I'll be like, hey, you okay? That's the first question I'll always ask somebody is like, you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Cool. What the hell are you doing? You're better than this. Whatever this is, rise above this, and I know for a fact that the second I do that, I'm opening up myself to a whole ton of critiques and whatnot. But I think I do a good job of making it well known that what I say and how I come across to people and interact with people is coming from a good place in my heart.
Yeah.
And it's not coming out of judgment. It's just to make sure, like, all right, if you're okay, cool. And 9 times out of 10, somebody will say, yeah, just this kind of frustrated me, or this frustrated me, and I'll just be like giving my little advice here. And so yeah, it's sometimes I kind of consider it to be a little presumptuous for me to just jump in there. But like I said, when I see a couple of my friends doing stuff and creating unnecessary drama, like that's the first thing I ask is like, are you okay? Is everything going okay? Is anything bugging you? Yada yada yada. Let's get into it. Let's talk about it. And if they ask, why are you showing interest in that? I'll be like, because, some of the things you were saying, publicly like that, I don't know if that was the smartest thing to do, wink,
Sure.
wink. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah, so it opens myself up to getting, lashed back at, which I can understand. I'm not oblivious to that. But when it comes to putting out a good message out there in the fantasy space and making sure that my friends out there are aware that their words have an impact publicly, and whether you're somebody trying to make it full time in this space, or whether you're just somebody who is just a presence in this space, like Twitter or X now is your resume, and so you have to be very cognizant of like what you're putting out there on social media, because you never know who's reading that. You never know who the negativity that you portray out there, how that could impact you, whether it's personally or professionally, and you just got to be careful with that.
Yes. Well, first of all, I would say that yes, you do convey a message of caring rather than cattiness, so don't worry about that, Jorge. And also, like you talked about, you give people advice. Could you give a quick run through on like what your standard advice would be for people that are in a moment of strife and want to lash out in the fantasy space?
I would say if somebody is bugging you to the point where you have to get defensive and project your defensiveness and tweeting back and like cursing at people and just going off on somebody, there's a very simple way to prevent all of that, and that's hitting that block button. Don't even go hit mute. Just go straight to the block button. Like, my experience in the fantasy space, I find it to be like really enjoyable. And I hate when I go online and I see some of my friends and whatnot, or just other people just randomly saying, oh my God, this is so toxic. This space has gotten so toxic. I don't find it that way, because maybe it's because I just block all the people who are toxic, and I just keep the people around who are like, fun going, just having a good time, enjoying this social network for what it is, being a social network to, as far as fantasy football is concerned, to talk shop or talk about whatever, to be honest with you. As much as we all love the fantasy football community, and as much as we, enjoy putting out content out there, I like talking about random BS too. I like talking about pro wrestling and Star Trek and, you name all sorts of dorky things. Like you're getting that from me. You're getting that from me. You're getting my personality. And if somebody's coming at you and is like viscerally going after who you are, just block them. make your space, make your time on social media as positive as you want it to be. And as far as the trolls are concerned, just get rid of them. Just get rid
Yeah,
of them.
I think that's fair. It's and it's you're speaking to also like me as someone, not that you're talking to me directly, but we've been friends for a while now, and I am totally happy to admit that the further you go back in my like relationship to the fantasy industry, the more catty and abrasive I was on social media. And I have found over the years that that was a result of me not like, I was harboring too much. I was holding too much in. I was trying to just like keep everything to myself. And then the moment I allowed myself to go into any sort of disagreement or combative role, like all of this kind of just negative, dismissive vibe would just start flooding out. And therapy has helped a lot, but it also, so like surrounding myself with the right people in the industry. And I've been blessed with this show and with the AI discussions with people like you and watching people's brands grow. At this point, I know a lot of people in the industry at the very highest level and the lowest level, and I have found that yeah, like you said, it's not that toxic. I had a long conversation with Chris Allen about this when he was on and worked at Fantasy Life. It's the biggest company in the industry, and we talked about how the toxicity is mostly like the bottom 60% of the industry, and it's not their fault. And in many ways it's a result of the rat race. Like you have like 5 to 10% of the industry max actually makes decent money or has a full-time job, and then everyone else is kind of like trying to get there or maybe not, or they're trying to figure out if they can, blah blah blah. And there's just a lot of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, things like that. But it fosters drama when there's a disconnect between like the return on investment for doing fantasy content between the vast majority of people in this industry and the people at the top. But if you take Jorge's advice and watch the other episodes in the show and try to get in tune with like the goodness of this industry, there's really no need for any of the drama. And truthfully, the further up you go in your career, as Jorge has alluded to, and as I have witnessed myself, like the drama is not really there. It's like, I call it the high school nature of the industry, like high school clickiness. Eh, it's there with brands that are trying to make a name for itself, and I think it's a natural result of that. And we could all always do better with it. But not to repeat myself for the fifth time, but it gets less and less as you get further up in the industry, for sure. For you, let me go back to these questions real quick. We talked about like strategies to maintain a healthy relationship to toxicity on the internet. For you, you've got a second job. Like Fantasy and Frames is actually, I would call that your second job, unless you view it as your first job. But you have, it sounds like, a career, and then like so many other people, you also do fantasy stuff. So there's a lot of demand that goes into like what people ask of Jorge Edwards. How do you balance and keep your life like steady and on track, knowing, and we haven't even talked about it yet, but knowing that you do have some things that you deal with mentally, and just in general, stay healthy with all of that?
I'd be lying if I said that the lines get blurred from time to time. It'd be easy for somebody to come on here and say, well, my time management skills are so superb that I'm able to compartmentalize, my real
Sure.
life outside the fantasy space versus I shouldn't say that. Both are, it's my real life, right? But my life outside of the fantasy space and my life.
We live in the matrix when we do fantasy.
Yeah, there are days where it feels like that. And look, again, I'm very fortunate that 1 year before the Fantasy Football Expo, I had asked my supervisor, can I take off a couple of days because I have to go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame for an event? And he was like, well, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, sure. First of all, yes, no problem. 2, what are you doing there? And I told him I had a fantasy football podcast, and he's like, what? And so they actually started tuning in. And then a couple of years later, we're at this major conference, and we're all sitting at the table. All the higher ups are there, and my peers are there, and they're going like, the higher ups are like asking people like one-on-one questions while we're all sitting at the table. So and so, what are your thoughts on this topic that came up at this, meeting, or what are your topics on this one? And they're getting closer and closer to me, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, Jorge, let's have like an intelligent response to anything they could possibly ask you.
Yeah.
they get to me, and I initiate the conversation. It was like, well, I was really interested. He's like, no. I don't want to hear that from you. I want to know who am I starting week one. Is it Geno Smith or is it Russell Wilson? I'm like, I can talk about more things besides fantasy football, but yeah, is there a little typecasting there? Absolutely. Do I care about it? No. I I just think it's funny. But yeah, so I do my best to, when I'm at work, I'm at work, and when I am home, I'm with my wife and my puppy, and I have my family and my friends that I have time for, and then the rest of the time is fantasy and frames time, and making sure that that's running smoothly, that everybody else is getting the exposure that they deserve to get, that they're being connected with the people I think they should be connected with to help progress them in their endeavors to either have this as a hobby or is to have this as a full-time gig. And it is what it is. If anything, as fantasy and frames has grown, I've taken more a step back from doing like a lot content production wise. Like I still make content, but not to the level that I did when I first started, because we have a large group with us. It's kind of like, well, once we had our large group grow last year, we doubled in size. And in fact, more than doubled in size last year. And it became a thing where I had to decide, okay, do I just want people sitting in the background while I'm still the figurehead and the face of everything that we're doing here? Or do I want to let the people who are working their butts off to help grow this brand be the ones who are front and center and having the opportunity for success that I had as I was coming up in the industry? And so I chose the latter. And then I started getting into things like, production, video production, graphics, there's just as much work making fantasy football content as there is producing fantasy football content. It is 100% equal, if not a little bit more challenging. But I love a challenge. I love learning new things. I love being able to do stuff, while at the same time, yeah, I still keep my feet wet. I still stay in the know, as they say, or do they even say that anymore? I don't even know. I'm so out of touch with like modern.
Yeah, I'm in the know. You see.
Yeah. Hello, my fellow friends. Yeah. But yeah, so it's giving me an opportunity to really, just learn a lot and just to help a lot of people in the space. But by doing something different, by doing more of a production thing, it's actually helped me professionally, because it's like, okay, well, I understand where my supervisors are coming from when they're trying to rally a group of people. So I try and bring some of those leadership qualities that I have, from fantasy and frames over to my current job. And that's helped me advance in terms of being able to just be respected and have one's opinions matter, because you understand where it's coming from. More, at least I understand more where it's coming from, having the same kind of responsibilities as my supervisors do, but in the fantasy space. And so there is overlap, and sometimes it's for the negative, where you come, you are up after Monday Night Football putting together a waiver wire article, and the next thing you know, it's like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're just like, oh, Tuesday is gonna suck so hard at work. Or you're late, one night with all these podcasts you got going on, and it's like, oh, Thursday is going to be horrible. And so there is some overlap with that, and like actual fatigue, burning the candle at both ends, as they say. But it's worth it for me. I find it worth it because I just have fun doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the core of it. Like the fantasy football, you go talk to, I'm sure you've talked to Bob Harris 100 different times over the years, especially with the Expo. Whenever I talk to him and I ask him about the industry, in the end, he's like, "Oh, it's really like, if you're not having fun, then don't do this.
Right.
If you're having fun, do it." And that's the core of the point of the entire fantasy football landscape, is to have fun and socialize and stay connected to people as we get older and grow apart. In, like, as you said earlier, in real life, we can use fantasy football as a way to stay connected and have fun. You also mentioned the production side of thing, and I want to make a quick note on that. Like, it is so easy for us as an audience, when we view someone's content, if we don't like what they're saying, to just kind of dismiss everything they're doing. but there is typically like a pretty decent chunk of work that goes into making content. And you can tell it's not true that everyone puts a lot of work in. Sometimes you can tell it's just like they're just winging it. But for the most part, people have graphics on their show. Like that's taken 30 or 45 minutes to get prepped. If people are like doing a consistent conversation like this for this show, I'm not patting myself on the back at all, but for all of these, I've spent over an hour on them, getting prepared, doing a little research, putting questions together, making a song, doing graphics, and so forth.
I'll do that for you. I'll do that for you. You do a hell of a good job. So if you're not going to pat yourself on the back, I'll pat you on the back. This is fantastic.
Well, it's a lot of work though. And like for me, this is all exposure therapy. I've talked about it too much on the show already. The focus is you guys, but I struggle with depression and anxiety and paralysis because of those two things and imposter syndrome. Like, am I really good enough to go talk with all these people that supposedly are my friends? They are, but like in your head, you have those thoughts. And for me at least. And so this has been a great exercise. And you have fostered a community for a lot of people like myself who even more so than me are fresh to like fantasy football and need to find a home where they can like cut their teeth a little bit and get sharp and work out the kinks, and providing a truly like holistic community that is about helping each other grow their brands and grow a positive presence for the industry is awesome. It is also something that I am really happy to say is not unique to you guys. It is like there's like 10 or 15 sites now, and their whole purpose is just to be good and to share and to grow brands and do that. And I think you guys are some of the trendsetters in that front. But it's a testament to the industry at large. Like it seems like more and more as the years go by, the old way of like, I'm going to make content. We're going to have the best content. You better like our content. We're going to give you the best answers. People are like, we've got good content. Is it the best? I don't know, but we're here to do good, and we're here to create a good community, and that is like the key word. And I think Fantasy and Frames has both really good content and the good community. I'm not saying that, but to end that ramble, I think that you guys have a really, really special community. You and Nate are fantastic. I've always valued y'all, and you've also dealt with ups and downs from Judgment from my end. They're just like a lot of times over the years where I've misinterpreted things or looked at scenarios being unplugged and made assumptions that were incorrect. And you guys have been pretty fantastic in like being patient with me and riding that wave a little bit over the years, for sure. So I appreciate you so much. And I think you're doing fantastic things. Can we close out with one thing real quick?
Yeah, do whatever you want.
Give me a run through. Give me some names, some people that have been like vital to helping you stay afloat as you've gone through everything that's been awful over the last year and just in general throughout your career in the industry.
So first and foremost, I would be remiss if I didn't say that the number one person who's had my back, as it were, has been my wife, Melissa. I love her to death. Without her and her giving of her time and just the I talk about my struggles, but the struggles of her having to come home after working a long day, to helping me out do stuff, the basic stuff around the house, to her looking after our dog, to her managing her individual personal life, as well as the life as her and I have, which we both find it very important to have that boundary of like we have our own lives too, on top of like having our lives as a couple, to the little things of like preparing, helping with meals, or like taking out the trash, like little things like that, like you normally would be used to helping out. Like that was all her for months on end.
Yeah,
And
she had to step up in a big way. She was essentially your caretaker, for a few
yeah,
months.
yeah,
Shout out to
yeah.
her.
So she deserves all the credit in the world for that. And so I definitely want to give a shout out to Melissa for that. As far as, and then of course my mom, my mother-in-law is a former nurse, retired nurse. And so she would come down and help out too. And so I was very fortunate to have that family support network. And then my friends in the industry, my friends outside of there, just whether they're coming over to hang out, every once in a while, or to FaceTime me. It just meant the world to me. And it's hard for me to it's hard for me to just point out just one or two people, because
Sure.
I'd be lying, and I don't want to leave out anybody. But I do want to say the Fantasy and Frames family was very instrumental to helping me stay afloat. People like yourself, Ronnie, have been super helpful. Jim Coventry is another
Jim's
person.
the man. Yeah.
Jim is the man. He is super helpful. Gary Davenport is another one I just want to throw
Also,
out there.
yeah.
Yeah, he. I can't wait to see him at the expo. I got plans for Gary at the expo, so
I
he'll
love
be.
it.
Um, and you go down the list of people that we all look up to and we all interact with on a daily, and in some form or the other, they've reached out, and even if it's just like a tweet or like a DM, like, "Hey, hope you're doing well," like you have no idea how much that has meant the world to me during my recovery process. And so I just want to take this opportunity and this platform to say thank you so much because it's meant the world.
Well, I love that. I've got one thing to summarize it all up. There's nothing stronger than family.
Love it. Love it. That's
Jorge, like, thank you for doing this. I know we said we wanted to keep it close to 30 or 40 minutes. And also a personal share. Like Jorge, I hit him up this morning because I tried to weasel out of doing this because I didn't sleep hardly at all last night. And I was just like, can we do it later? Part of what is really cool about therapy and mental health, like recovery, is that you get to notice a change in habits and pat yourself on the back for little things. And like you said, show some grace. I forget the guy's name. He has a TED talk and he talks about habit forming, and it's like small little habits, like just pick one for 5 minutes a day. And then when you're done, you have to congratulate yourself. And that's his rule. It's like, you have to, like, I did the dishes, and stop and like an idiot stand there and be like, go me, I did the dishes. And for this, a year ago, Jorge, I would not have done this episode today. I would have just messaged you and been like, hey, I'm tired, I can't. And so that's just a personal share to shout out therapy. And it's
kudos to you, man. Kudos to you for acknowledging that, and for obviously I'm really glad that we're talking, we're doing this, and the people are watching, and hopefully they gain something out of it. So if you're not going to pat yourself on the back, like I said, I'll pat you on the back, because
mutual pats. Pat you on the back for your
there
recovery.
you go. I love it.
Well, I love you, dude. Thank you for coming on. Any final thoughts before we close this out?
For those out there who are struggling with their mental health on a daily basis, understand that the fact that you are handling it on a daily basis is a testament to your strength. Okay.
Yes.
And then if you ever need to recharge, I'm always pro therapy. I am pro medication. I am pro whatever you need to do to get a grip and to get some footing and start that climb back up to a point where you feel comfortable in your own skin. Like I said, you only get one shot at this world. Claw yourself to a place of happiness. Sorry to keep rambling, but there's one of my favorite scenes in all sports in terms of cinema was from Any Given Sunday, Al Pacino giving the Peace with Inches speech, which, if you haven't listened to it, go on YouTube, type it in, Peace with Inches, watch it. It is probably the most poignant speech relating not just to football, but to life, about how if you inch and you claw yourself towards success, every inch is the difference between winning and losing in life. And he does it 10 times more better than I just explained it. So definitely go check that out. And don't be afraid to reach out for help. And if there's it's a lot of work. I'm not going to lie and sit here that it's simple to get one's life in order, but putting in the hard work in the beginning, building that support network, reaching out and getting that help, it pays off in the long run. So don't be afraid to take those steps. And if you ever need any guidance or help, feel free to reach out to me. My DMs are open at Jorge B. Edwards on Twitter. I'm more than happy to talk to you and to do what I can.
Love it. Well, definitely reach out to Jorge, follow him on X, make sure to support Fantasy and Frames. And just to add to what he just said, earlier when you started that, you were said like, I don't care whether it's medication or therapy or something else. I agree. Like different strokes for different folks. You got to find something that you believe in and that you value, and be ready to like work hard. That's the key. It's not easy to do this. The caveat I would add is that until you're willing to get help and do it with another person, you're going to struggle. You can't do it on your own. So with that note, that's why Jorge and I are here, and all these other amazing people that have come on the show. Appreciate all y'all. And I'll be back tomorrow with Jeff Bell.
What's going on between my ears? Everyone seems to be so clear, but I'm feeling foggy. I'm not feeling okay. Let's talk about it with Ronnie and Jorge.